People who live rurally, what's the scariest experience you've had that you can't explain? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I was camping alone in the middle of the plains of North Dakota. A storm blew in and I was stuck in my tent under some trees and got a super strange feeling. I had two phones on me at the time. One had internet and was for navigating, and the other was just for cell reception, 2013. All of a sudden, one of the phones started ringing and I looked at the caller ID. The call was coming from the other phone, which was closed and in my hand. 8 years old, in very 45 miles away from the nearest anything on top of a mountain in rural Appalachia. I was sitting on my couch with my dad at around 9 p.m. in winter with freshly fallen snow, watching of all things Sightings, an old 90s show about alien encounters which scared the absolute shit out of me. Anyway, we heard a on the window. Keep in mind it's pitch black outside, so whatever could see us, but we couldn't see them. Dad told me to sit right there with the telephone beside me, and he ran outside with a mag light to go see what it was. He locked the door behind him, and he had explicit instructions that if he didn't come back in 5 minutes, to call the police. I was terrified. He ran around the house and came back in, downplayed it, saying it must have been an animal, but directly after all of this, he took the long-corded phone in the other room and called his best friend to come up and investigate. He thought I was zoned out on TV, but I was listening. He said, "I'm telling you, there was a knock like someone was knocking on the window to be let in, but there was no footprints." It's still scary, and I'm in my late 30s now. 15 years ago, I had a seasonal job with the U.S. Forest Service in western Colorado for the summer. I was living in an old ranger station by myself. One night I had a dream that someone was walking around the cabin while I was in bed. When I woke up that morning, the front door was wide open. For the rest of the summer, I slept with a large knife close by. This isn't super scary experience or anything, but at the time I was like 10 or so. It was pretty unnerving. So I was staying with my grandparents who lived pretty much in the middle of nowhere, and a dude knocked on their door. He asked for some directions to town, but they lived on a dead-end road where the only way to get up there is to come from town, so he obviously knew where it was. They then pointed in the direction he needed to go, and then he said thanks. But instead of getting back into his car, he just ran off into the woods as fast as he could. They called the cops, but they never found him, so we have no clue what happened. He left his car in their driveway and never came back for it. My mother lives alone pretty much in the woods, completely dark at night. No streetlights or lights from neighbors, only a small road leading up to the house. One time in the middle of the night, she woke up to clear footsteps on the gravel, you know the sound, and 3 knocks on the front door. She called out hello and looked outside and nothing there, only silence. It might not be a spectacular story, but I would freak out if it was me waking up to the middle of the night with no other people around. I grew up on a small property in regional Australia. We lived about 3 to 4 kilometers out of town, so not super far, but also far enough that we never really got disturbed. On top of that, we were on a dead-end street down the end of another street off of the main road, so not once have I ever seen a pedestrian near my house. Anyway, one night when I was about 12, I was watching TV when 2 of my brothers came downstairs and said, "Did you hear that?" I was pretty glued to the TV, so didn't hear a thing, but apparently they heard footsteps outside and a couple of hushed voices. Seeing as how my brothers were both around 20 and both big rugby playing dudes, their plan for me was to wait inside while they ran outside and tackled anybody they could find before calling the cops. So they both sprinted out the front door at the same time, splitting in different directions to wrap around the house and meet again on the other side, presumably each with a criminal wrapped in a headlock under their arm. If you've ever seen the movie Signs, where Mel Gibson and Joaquin Phoenix run around the house, basically just picture that. Anyway, they never found them. Swear to this day that they heard voices, but nobody was ever seen. Our property has a lot of thick bushland right up to the house, so we all can think is that when my brothers came out, these guys just dissolved back into the bush and watched. Then probably just took off once the coast was clear again. The whole thing scared the hell out of me. Camping as a kid behind Buddy's house, heard most god-terrifying screech, like 2 pieces of metal being rubbed together. Hands absolutely trembled, unzipping tent, and we hauled ass to the house. Honestly, I was still scared in there too. Thought something was going to come through the window and get me. Probably a cougar or mountain lion, I suppose, but they aren't common here at all. I live in the country, and it is weird how both my dogs will key in on something and run to a place in the yard, focused, driven, hackles up, snarling, and there's absolutely nothing there, nothing. And they aren't looking down or digging, they look up. A few weeks later it happens again, different area of the property, on and on. Been here for years now, and even the new dogs do it. Something is here with us. Was staying with my dad, who lived in rural Kansas, 15 minutes from the nearest small town, an hour from the bigger city. He lived on an acre of property, with the house being toward the front of it. One night I had to return a shovel or something we had been using to the shed that was in the back of the property, right along the wooded area with a creek running through it. I should mention, the home was previously owned by puppy breeders, although the conditions looked like it could have been a puppy mill. Either way, wildlife was constantly being spotted in this area, and we figured plenty of predators realized this was at one time a food source for them. So, one night I was taking the shovel back to the shed when it was dark out. I had a floodlight on so I could see my way. When I got to the shed, I started to hear a low growl, very, very close to me. Considering the forested and brush-filled area was only feet away from me, something could have easily been in there watching me. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I was almost frozen until I realized I just needed to get out. I kept the shovel with me and walked backwards all the way back to the house. I told my dad what had happened and why I still had the shovel, and he basically just said, "That's okay, we'll get it tomorrow," which seemed odd because he was very no excuses kind of guy. Makes me wonder if he saw something there previously. I grew up on a ranch in a small old California ranch house. Lots of windows to stay cool in the summer, almost all the rooms open to the central living room. I was probably 14, my brother was 11, and my mom was out that night running an errand. Brother and I are together in the living room. He's sitting by the stove, and I'm lying on the sofa. We're both doing homework. Inside the lights are on, but through the windows it's pitch black. As I'm reading, I hear footsteps on the mud porch leading up to the front door. It's an old house, and I can hear the heavy footsteps clearly, but I hadn't seen my mom's car drive in. I hadn't seen or heard any car. It's the country. I would have heard a car approaching and seen their headlights through the dark windows, but there was nothing, just the footsteps on the porch. They stop at the front door, but no one knocks. I'm frozen. If I'd gotten up and looked around the corner through the kitchen, I would have seen the owner of the footsteps standing at the door, which had a window, but then they would have seen me. If I talk to my brother, they'll hear me, and in the dark, anyone could be looking through the window at us, but we couldn't see out. I go through all my options. The person is standing at the only door in or out of the house, which is always unlocked. If I go to the kitchen to grab a knife, they will see me, and no, I see them. We can't hide. The house is too small, and they'll see where we go. My heart is racing. My best option is to pretend I don't know for as long as I can and be ready for whatever comes next. But after a few minutes, I don't hear any more footsteps. I calm down. I might have just imagined it. 20 minutes later, I hear my mom's car and see the headlights go across the window. I run outside because I'm still a child and I want my mother to know how scared I am. But before I can tell her, she asks me, "Who left the water on?" And I'm terrified again. We had this weird water spigot in the front yard with a pole that shot up to about waist height and the spigot turned up instead of down. My brother and I would treat it like a drinking fountain or turn it on full blast and play under it like a fountain. When she got home, the water was on. Full blast, shooting several feet up into the air. Someone had been there that night, on our porch. They saw my brother and I alone, no car in the drive. They didn't come in, but they wanted us to know they could have. Unfortunately, it's hard to explain. I was hiking down a trail with my dog in remote northern Wisconsin when I just got a weird feeling. At the exact same time, the hackles on my dog went straight up and he began acting really anxious. About the same time, I came into a clearing in the woods and got hit with what I can only describe as a sound wave. It was like someone was blasting a subwoofer right next to me, but there was nothing around. The nearest road was maybe a mile away. Something told me to get the F out of there. so I quickly turned around and hiked as quickly as I possibly could the rest of the way back. I didn't hear that bass sound after I left the clearing, but I still felt like something was following me. Our two normally placid black Labradors woke me up. My bedroom was on the ground floor, making an awful growly barking sound I've never heard them make, with real aggression and fear in it. We lived in the countryside with a huge common and woods out the back of the house. I went into the kitchen and they were glaring at the back door and making a big fuss. This made my hair stand on end, and their obvious terror communicated itself to me. I grabbed a torch and steeled myself, thinking maybe it was an intruder, and armed myself with a fire poker and opened the back door. It was pitch dark, and as I opened the door, both dogs shied away and ran into the other room. I poked my head and the torch out the back door, and just for a split second, I saw reflective eyes of a really large creature somewhere up the garden, maybe 10 meters away. They blinked as they turned away, and they were gone. There is literally nothing in England that can account for this. I slammed the door shut, and me and the dogs slept in my bedroom, half terrified. The local paper shortly after that featured an article about some unexplained sheep deaths in a farm a mile away from ours. They had been ripped to shreds, as if by a large predator. I'm semi-rural, village with houses and shops, but surrounded by fields. There are loads of Neolithic and Bronze Age monuments, like 1,000 in a 5-mile radius. Anyway, there is this one prehistoric grave which is open, the contents having been moved to the museum. I jumped in one time to get a photo taken. My dog, a placid old black lab, suddenly started barking with full alert mode, hackles, danger, right at me, in the burial cyst. Still shudder to remember the moment. Maybe it was a snake, I don't know. Semi-rural Australia. I wouldn't say can't explain, but I do get mighty annoyed at the amount of bullet holes I keep finding in shed iron, solar panels, P2P radio dishes, and so on. The holes are often tumbled or keyhole as well, so I don't think it's F-wits shooting directly, more like shooting at a 45-degree angle from miles away or something. It would ruin my serenity to get breened by a random bullet. I lived in Japan and went on a trip into the mountains with a friend of mine. On a night ramble with him in an unfamiliar area, we both happened upon a torii that was immediately met with an impassable rock face. This seemed strange to me, as torii were symbolically passageways. He and I both instinctively looked up to the sky while standing before the torii, and somewhere that felt close to Earth, a great multicolored light appeared, hovering above us, letting off light almost like a gas in the full spectrum of colors, before disappearing. He and I both felt something incredibly significant had happened, but had no idea what. Very odd feeling. Rural East Texas, 1972 or 3. I was 10. My job, among other things, was to check the mailbox. My mother's dachshund, Gracie, liked to make the long walk with me. One summer afternoon, a coyote lay beside the mailbox, and when we got closer, it began jumping around like it wanted to play. Gracie started yapping and wagging her tail, but I scooped her up and hightailed back home. Next day, same thing. Third day, I wasn't paying attention, and Gracie bolted and got too close. 2 larger coyotes came out of the high grass and carried her off. A couple days later, I was on my way to check the mail again, because that's how shit rolled back then, and that same damn coyote was sitting in the same spot, and when I got close enough, it started jumping like it wanted to play with me. Should have shot it. I'm rather rural, like an hour from even a supermarket. A few months ago, I was in my recliner trying to sleep. My eyes popped open, only to see a solid black figure standing just off the corner of the chair. It bent over at the waist and turned its neck funny. It was like it was trying to get a good look at me at eye level. I panicked and bit, and all I could do was yell, "What? And it disappeared. Part of me thought I must have been dreaming, but then I realized that my German Shepherd was hiding underneath the foot of the recliner, something he had never done in his 6 years. He did that for the next few weeks. My wife, kids, and I live 30 miles or so outside of town on 100 acres. The house sits half a mile off the main road. My wife wanted the works for security when we got the place, so I did a gate, driveway doorbell past the gate, cameras at the gate and at the house, alarm system, 2 new puppies, you name it. I've always lived way out my whole life, so I'm used to the hog squeals, coyote screams, deer huffing, all that jazz. One night, around 2 a.m., I heard a loud shatter, and instantly it was covered by the alarm siren for the house. The main keypad is in our bedroom, and I look to see glass break sensor in our son's bedroom is tripped. I'm thinking the worst, grab a shotgun, kept for rattlesnakes, and run to his bedroom hollering for my wife to grab our youngest from his crib just in case. I hear my oldest son screaming. I'm shaking so violently I can barely turn the doorknob. My adrenaline fight response has completely taken over. I throw the door open, let out a war cry, trying to intimidate a would-be intruder, and my son is clinging to the crib rails and glasses all over the floor. I can just feel the cold winter air snapping through the room. I shut his bedroom door behind me, grab him up, and frantically check the bathroom, his closet, anywhere in the area I thought the intruder would be. I yell for my wife again. Living this far out, we have a system if someone is ever in the house and one of us knows but we don't want to alert the intruder. She gives a response indicating she's alone, still, and okay. I take my son to my wife and hand her the shotgun, telling her I'll grab the rifle and check around inside and out. I grab a flashlight and my rifle. I scan the entire house. I walk outside and hit the auto lock on the deadbolt. I quickly make my way around the back side of the house to the busted window. My adrenaline has started coming down, and I'm logically telling myself it had to have been a deer, right? Saw his reflection buck the window. Window broke. That's got to be it. I checked high and low all around the house and never found any indication to what it was. I checked the cameras and couldn't find anything around the house at that time either. I couldn't sleep the rest of the night. It took a few weeks for me to let my son sleep in his own bedroom again. I'm positive it was just a deer attacking his reflection, but I've always wondered if someone broke the window and heard the siren and immediately ran. Now that was a blind spot watching that particular window. I've installed more cameras since the incident, and I have one of those point down each side of the house just to watch windows and entrances. Motion sensing floodlights on all four corners, and my favorite, one of our pups sleeps right beside his bed every night. I was driving a friend home at around midnight one night down this lone country road between villages we lived in. We got to this small bridge and I could see a small cloud-like thing slowly moving across the road as we approached. A bit of fog, I thought, pretty standard stuff. As we drove through it, the fog actually went through the car rather than us through it, and I jumped a mile. My friend wasn't paying attention to the road, but he also agrees that he saw this fog pass right in between the two of us and out the back. And to this day, I can't explain it.